All right. This hypothetical is so far removed from reality that it's probably not even worth entertaining, but I'm going to go ahead and entertain it anyway. So the first thing you mentioned is the removal of the Second Amendment. You can't remove an amendment. You can't even edit an amendment. Once an amendment is in the Constitution, it is in the Constitution. And the only way to repeal or nullify the contents of that amendment is to propose a new amendment to that effect. This was the case with the 18th and 21st Amendment, where the 18th Amendment was the prohibition of alcohol. And then a couple years later, we were like, hey, this kind of sucks. So we proposed and ratified the 21st Amendment to repeal prohibition. So in order to do that in this case, one of two things would have to happen. Either 2/3 of both the House of Representatives and the Senate would have to approve a joint resolution to that effect, or 2/3 of the state legislatures would have to call for a constitutional convention. None of the 27 amendments have ever been proposed by constitutional convention. So you would need 2/3 of all the representatives and 2/3 of all the senators in this country to propose an amendment to approve a joint resolution proposing an amendment to repeal the Second Amendment. I really don't see that happening, but since we're in a hypothetical, let's keep going. So let's say that does happen. So now that proposal goes back down to the states, and 3/4 of the state legislatures have to ratify that amendment. So that's 38 states, which means if 13 states say, nah, we don't want to do this, then the amendment dies. Keep in mind, this is by state. So California counts as one, New York counts as one, Tennessee counts as one, Wyoming counts as one. Every state counts for one. Also keep in mind, currently, 30 states have Republican-controlled legislatures, so you would need 13 of those 30 states to say, yeah, now we're pretty happy with the Second Amendment, we're going to keep it, and the amendment would just die. But since we're in our fantasy land, let's go ahead and continue. So let's say this amendment does get ratified, and the Second Amendment is no longer applicable. Magically, guns go away, I guess. People turn them in, or they just magically, I don't know. But what you're asking me is now if the president, who, by the way, keep in mind, I haven't mentioned the president yet because the president plays no role in the amendment process. It is strictly done between Congress and state legislatures. So even if Joe Biden wanted to repeal the Second Amendment, he'd have to have Congress do it for him. But if the president decided that vaccinations were now mandatory and he wanted the military to enforce that policy, he can't do it. The Posse Comitatus Act prevents him from using the military to enforce domestic policy. Only governors in a state of emergency can activate their National Guards to enforce policy. The president cannot do it. He cannot take federal troops and send them to states in order to enforce his policy. So, no. Like in this whole hypothetical, just no. No.